About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's go, let's be free with Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Hi there, and welcome to our next politics live stream of 2022, our second one. Those of you who joined us last week got to enjoy some rigorous debate about the powers of the Prime Minister, and today we've got a different sort of debate question that we're going to focus our activities around, which is whether we need to change our voting system for general elections to a more proportional system. There's a lot of potential content to discuss within that about the different voting systems and their impact. And I'm joined as ever today by Kira. Hi, Kira.
Hello.
How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm glad that we've got people here not watching Parliament and all the exciting things going on right now.
I was going to say, I mean, obviously when people watch this on catch up in a few weeks' time, they won't know what we're talking about, but but we are competing with the Prime Minister's statement in the Commons, although I don't want to put people off now. People might say, oh, really? And turn us off. But yeah, so there's been the publication of the Sue Gray report, shall we say, or an update on the Sue Gray report. There's not actually that much in it, but that's a discussion for another time. This isn't the politics topical news panel, is it? So shall we crack straight on with the with our first activity, which I think is over to you with the application gallery. Oh, shall I just quickly say also, before we do that, if you're watching live and you want to join in with the activities, and we really hope you do, please do put your answers into the live chat window. If you're watching on catch up, you obviously haven't got that option, but you do have the possibility of pausing the video maybe and having a bit more time to think about some of the questions. Okay, let's make a start. So, the application gallery.
Yeah, okay. So what you're going to see for this activity is some images, and you need to look at the image and think what topic can be associated with the image. So we're thinking more so for this one about recalling the voting systems that we use in the UK. So for this first one, I think this might be hopefully a bit of an easy one. So looking at it, what voting system do you think this might represent? Looking at it, just pop your answer in the chat when you finish dancing.
I like the theme music for this one. Feels like it's a sort of Netflix comedy crime.
So any guesses about what it could represent?
I know what the answer's meant to be, but I did think of another possible one for this, so I'll.
Oh, really? Okay, I don't know actually. Yeah. Okay, good. Freya's coming there with a great guess. Excellent, Rory. Yeah, I think everyone's got this one nice and easy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is. I don't know if I want to sing it over the music or. Yeah, so this one is first past the post then. So nice and easy. It's a majoritarian system, and this is a simple system where essentially the winner takes all. So whoever gets over 50% of the votes effectively can form the government. And we use this in our general elections in the United Kingdom. So obviously what we're thinking about today in terms of our question and our debate is, should we move away from this majoritarian system of first past the post and perhaps take a more proportional system to allow more votes to kind of count in the UK? So that one was a nice, easy start there. But what did you think it could have been, Duncan?
I was just thinking, because there are 2 Swiss people and 2 British people and 2 Belgian people on the, obviously the main thing was that it was a race and the first past the post. But I thought, something like single transferable vote, where you're voting from, you could potentially elect more than one person from the same party, and that's so I had a little single transferable vote thought there as well. But it does make more sense as first past the post. Shall we?
That's like next levels. Very true. It definitely could have been that, but I don't think I'm that smart. But thank you.
Okay, we've got the music again in a moment, haven't we? But we've got a couple more pictures here. Now, I'll be honest. My my sort of geography wasn't quite good enough to. Although now I look at it, I can see where that picture is. I was like, I had to see your answers before I knew where it was. But now I look at it, I recognise the building behind it, of course. But anyway, so let's have
I know it's a bit centric of the city where I live, I think. But this one's, I think, maybe might be a bit harder to think about. But essentially, the images for the next 2 rounds actually represent where it's used. So think more so about where these images, what these images represent, and then you can think about where it's used in the country. And then you can probably work it out. Let's give you maybe a bit of a clue. It is another kind of majoritarian system. Have like 2 preferential votes. Maybe see if you can even just work out what the images might represent.
Oh, you might
Excellent.
have.
Yeah. Okay. So
you might have stumped people a bit more with this one.
Yeah, maybe a bit harder, but yeah, it's the image on the left represents City Hall, where the Mayor of London works. So maybe that might help a little bit. So yeah, this is supplementary vote then, and it's used in 2 elections, and that is for our mayoral election, the Mayor of London, and it's also used for our police and crime commissioners vote. So it's
other mayors are available. I'm going to say, as our representative from the provinces, I'm going to say we do use supplementary vote to elect some other mayors, not just the Mayor of London.
Well, there's another place other than London in the UK. I didn't realise.
Yeah, there are other places. Yeah.
I need to leave the city. I definitely agree. Sorry, that's terrible. Oh my god.
It's all right.
But so this one is an interesting one because you can use, the London mayor election of 2016 as a good example, talking about how Sadiq Khan in 2016 got the 50% of the vote, so he didn't have to go to the kind of second round. So that's why it's still a majoritarian system. It's just maybe a slightly more fair version of majoritarian because the second preference votes do have some sway. Okay, so
Okay.
on to the next one then.
Okay.
And I've gotten out of London for these ones.
Absolutely.
Oh, kind of. I've still got London there.
Partly.
What's the North-South divide? Never heard of it. So again, I tried to do it in a way that was maybe a bit too tricky, but try and think about what each of these images would represent. Take a guess one. So the bottom right is City Hall again, but it's not the mayor, it's the other part of the mayoral government. So all three of these use this voting system. Excellent, yeah, we're getting it now, perfect, right? And can you guess which each image is? So yeah, it is, you're right, it's completely right. It's an alternative member system, so they're kind of more hybrid system, where you have two separate votes, constituency and for party. So yeah, excellent prayer, perfect Fran. So yeah, the correct answer is AMS, and the first image is representing the Scottish Parliament. Where you can see what I find quite interesting about the Scottish and Welsh one is how different they look to Westminster, because they're trying to kind of show them, I think, maybe a bit more transparent. I think that's kind of what they're going for there. So you've got Scottish Parliament, Welsh Assembly, and of course the London Assembly.
Of course, we should say, of course, Welsh Parliament now, actually, shouldn't we?
Of course.
Yeah, I've just remembered, but yeah, it's it is a parliament now, but absolutely okay, very good. So additional member system, it is, and sort of along a similar sort of lines now. It's something called a connection wall. We're going to see a group of 12 key phrases that I want you to group into 3 groups of 4. So find the connections between them. If you've seen Only Connect on BBC Two with Victoria Coren Mitchell, you'll get the general idea of what you do, but it's not as hard as that, you'll be pleased to know. But can you link these together? I'll give you a little bit of time just to look at it, because I know we've got some very high quality students on watching this live who may well be able to spot the connections without me giving you too much in the way of a prompt. So let's see if you can spot any groups of 4 without me to start with. At least one of those is something that we've just heard about. We know, I've just noticed the use for Scottish Parliament elections, so we kind of know what that is from the previous question. So you might be able to find the rest of that group of 4, and then see if you can find the other 2 groups of 4 as well. Any ideas? If you don't want to type everything out, you can either do a brief version or you can give me a grid reference. So, for example, D3, and then what the other 3 from that group would be. Before we get on to the kind of the analysis and evaluation, we've got Rory's come in with A1, D1, D2 and C2. I think that... Oh, well, yeah, yes. Oh, C2. Where's that one? Oh, yeah. I think that could well be a group. Sorry, I was doing a bad job of my grid referencing there. Yes, once I worked out where C2 was, I think that could well be a group. What is the group, though? What's the connection, Rory? I think you are absolutely right.
It's like geography revision too, right? Cross-culture.
Absolutely. We're embedding numeracy skills into the... so Rory's saying that group's first past the post, so that could well be right. We'll wait and see when I reveal them. I think that's the third group to be revealed, if that is a group. What should we think about? So if I remind you that D3 used for Scottish Parliament elections, we had that in the first section, and that was definitely additional member system, wasn't it? Can we spot 3 other things that could link to the additional member system along with used for Scottish Parliament elections? So Don's come in with the rest of them, I think. So he's got B1C3 and hang on, that's confusing me because have you got 4 there? Yes, yeah, I've got 4. C3, A2, and B3 as being STV. Some of those are STV. I'm not sure they're all STV, unless I'm misreading the grid references again. No, I'm not. That's all right. A couple of those are a different system. Any other thoughts? Anyone going to get the other 3 for additional member system? You all knew that they were used for the Scottish and Welsh Parliament elections. Can you say anything else about them? That's going to be our first group of 4. Shall I flash that one up, and then that might help us with the other 2? Although I think people are doing pretty well with the first past the post one. I think people have spotted that one. Yeah, I had a couple of people have spotted that one. Okay, so the additional member system one is very similar to a couple of systems that are used in Germany. We sometimes just say Germany uses additional member system. It is slightly different than multi-member system. It's a hybrid system, which means it combines aspects of first past the post and a party list type system, which is what the next one there combines first past the post and party list. And it's used for Scottish Parliament elections, as we already knew. Okay, we've identified first past the post. 2 people have got those. So do we know what the link is between the other ones, the ones that you haven't got? So Rory and Don have said that simple plurality used in US and UK, candidate with the most votes wins, and lots of wasted votes links to first past the post. So which system uses the droop quota? It's used in Scottish local elections, used in the Republic of Ireland, and is the preferred system of the Electoral Reform Society. What do we think?
It is a great system, even if it does require a lot of maths.
Yeah, Don's got there now, so absolutely, that's single transferable vote, STV, which does indeed leave us with first past the post for the others. Yeah, so it is STV rather than SV, just to reiterate the difference between those. Single transferable vote is a very complicated proportional system that involves quotas and whatnot, and ends up with a pretty proportional outcome. Supplementary vote is the one we mentioned before for the mayor, where you're electing one position, one post, but you take account of people's second preferences. So to a certain extent, it limits the amount of kind of what do you call it, voting for tactical voting. Although you could suggest it just creates a different sort of tactical voting. But okay, well done. Some good answers there. So it's quite a tricky activity that, but it's quite a good one to think. Yeah, to spot those links. So we've done some knowledge type work there, but we're going to look at some of the other skills now. I'm going to pass back to Kira for the connection spinner.
Cool, thank you. All right, so for this one then, there's going to be a statement in the middle. So like we were talking about why we should switch to a more proportional representative system, then you need to think about like a criteria. Like you wouldn't just say everything in one paragraph and then something else in another paragraph. It's about trying to split the argument into 3 parts for 3 nice meaty paragraphs of an argument and a counter argument. So let's say that we chose our first criteria to say we should switch towards a more proportional system because it is more democratic than first past the post. So that's going to be like our argument. our criteria, sorry, and an argument could be about one of these kinds of things that are put forward around the statement. So we're going to spin and see which one pops up, and then what I want you to do when it selects one, I want you to put in the chat why, like why is this actually something that might be quite good to making PR more democratic. So let's set the spinner off and see where it lands.
Oh, the jeopardy. Where's it going to stop?
Okay, nice. So it looks like it's saying proportional representation is more democratic because it reduces wasted votes. So how can you just put down in the chat, like, how does PR reduce wasted votes, and why is that more democratic? Just put down any kind of ideas that you might have. So, like, why are wasted votes bad for democracy? Or even are they? I don't know. I
What
did
do we?
a school election once, and one of my students decided to spoil the ballot by saying democracy is false and we need to have anarchy. So they're not all bad.
What I mean, what do we mean by wasted votes? What are wasted votes?
Yeah. So, like, yeah, the idea of you feel that, for example, with in the constituency where I live, Brent Central, if you vote any party other than Labour, you may as well just not turn up because Labour, apart from one weird year in 2010, Labour always wins. So if you're voting Conservative, Green, UKIP, you're not really contributing to the electoral process.
No. And also, you could argue that quite a lot of the Labour votes are wasted as well, because once you've got enough, once you're past the post, if you like, all the rest are
Mm,
sort of surplus votes, aren't they? So they're not really doing anything either. It's still just electing one Labour MP. And,
mm.
the same could be true of the Conservative MP where I live. So,
Yeah, very true. And then
yeah.
what ends up happening is people feel that their voice doesn't count, right? And
Hmm.
as someone's just put down, everyone's vote is counted, so it's more democratic. Yeah. And actually, it's not even just about everyone's vote being counted, but everybody realizing and feeling like they're part of the democratic process. So I think like a really good thing to argue for this is that essentially it can help voters to feel more valued. And if they feel more valued, then it reduces apathy, and apathy is very dangerous for a democracy because we're thinking about the democratic criteria. One of the fundamental things is participation. And if people feel that their vote doesn't matter and voting is the most important part of being in a democracy, then that can actually have really serious consequences. Don said that it reduces wasted votes because, unlike first past the post, there is not the risk of safe seats and unequal constituencies, whereby some votes are made irrelevant. Yeah, exactly. So, like Duncan and I were saying, like in both of our constituencies, it's a Labour safe seat. So, if you're voting for anyone other than Labour, you're not really making much of an impact on British democracy. Rory said all votes or a bigger proportion of votes can be accounted for in PR. Fantastic, and you see that your vote does actually have some impact, such as in STV. And it often leads to coalitions, so more people feel represented, increasing participation and avoiding tyranny of the majority. Fantastic, yeah. So one of the issues with first past the post is it can be very much winner takes all, which does create strong governments. But actually, is it better to have multiple voices and more plurality than just a singular party? Sorry, Duncan, what are you going to say?
I was just going to say, just a quick counter argument, I suppose you could say, do votes have to lead to be a vote that wins to not be wasted? Because I mean, people who vote for parties that never win, I wouldn't necessarily they will say they were wasted votes. They are casting a vote and showing what level of support there is for those. Yeah, because even in a proportional system, there'll be some candidates that don't get a seat because not enough people vote for them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that those votes are wasted, does it? I'm just a counter argument, but
Yeah, no,
it's
true. And I think one thing that's interesting that I've noticed over the last couple of elections is we start talking about the popular vote a lot more now than we did
Mhm.
before. So it is interesting to see if we did have a more kind of proportional system, how that would actually impact the MPs in Parliament.
Yeah,
And
great
with
point
that,
from.
go on, sir.
Oh, you finish your point. I was sorry.
No, no, it's fine.
All right. I was just going to say, there's a great point from Fran there that if people feel their vote counts, they're more likely to vote, and if there's a better turnout, there's a better mandate for the people who do win, etc. So it can have a lot of positive knock-on effects, can't it, if people feel that their vote counts.
Very true, and again, linking it back to the criteria we put, it makes it more democratic. Essentially,
sorry.
which is really important. No, it's fine. So let's see what we've got next.
I set the spinner going faster than I intended. Then,
Okay, so this next one then. So proportional representation is more democratic because it allows for greater choice. So what could we say to support that argument? So it's more democratic because it allows for greater choice. So yeah, I guess with first past the post, obviously it creates a two-party system. It was 2.5 parties, party system in 2010, but Liberal Democrats have become a lot less relevant, poor guys. So how could PR maybe make an impact on that? How can it change that?
it's interesting because there's a lot of talk at the moment, if we think about both main parties, about quite strong differences between members of those parties. I mean, if people were watching the Parliament channel before flipping over to watch us, they'll have seen Theresa May being pretty savage towards Boris Johnson, the previous Conservative leader, having a pretty strong go at the current one. And similarly, there are seemingly irreconcilable differences between the current Labour leader and the previous Labour leader. But there's something about first past the post that sort of pushes these people together to be in the same party, isn't it? The idea that you could perhaps have a different... Yeah, because you sort of think, well, why would Tony Blair and Jeremy Corbyn be in the same political party? But it's partly that neither's politics is quite popular enough without the other.
Yeah, true. So yeah, we do get a spread of ideas across a political party. You do have a spectrum of ideas, and backbenchers do hold some power over kind of swaying the prime minister or the leader of the opposition. Although I think the powers of the prime minister do kind of limit the scope for that, but then they can't do whatever they want. As we've seen with Boris Johnson's coronavirus policy, it's very much defined by his backbenchers, right, who are anti-lockdown, anti-mask, and so forth. Don said greater choice provided by PR allows for wider choice of parties as they are elected based on percentage of votes in a larger multi-member constituency rather than single member. Yeah, excellent, right? So yeah, I think that's a real key thing that proportional representation allows for. It's more democratic because smaller parties have a chance of gaining more power. So then you would have it where people maybe feel disenfranchised or frustrated at the main two political parties, seeing them in many different critical ways, and they can maybe choose a minor party. Like we're seeing the Green Party is quite popular with young people, but then at the same time they do still break through. Green Party does have an MP, and UKIP did have enough of a kind of sway on the Conservative government by being a pressure group through gaining seats not seats but votes to kind of force the Conservative government to make some changes. So yeah, I think that's the main thing. It's more democratic because it allows for greater choice. Don also said safe seats are therefore less likely as parties are elected on a regional scale. Yeah, very true, right? So it's not just about the demographics of an area, but about creating policies that do try to appeal to as many people as possible.
Okay. Yeah, and I just the reason I made the point about the sort of what have these people got in common that they're in the same party is that you probably in a PR system have more parties because people wouldn't feel the need to be in a catch-all party necessarily. You'd think, oh well, we could be, if you look at say, I don't know, I'll pick one at random, Sweden, the Social Democratic Party and the Left Party are effectively like the right and left of the Labour Party here, or the centre and the left of the Labour Party here. They're separate parties, and you may well see, if we had a PR system, more parties representing a wider range of opinion rather than times where one faction or another is in charge of a much larger party.
Yeah. And Rory said, and this is true as well, I think, so people are more inclined to vote for smaller parties as it becomes more realistic that they would be represented, avoiding the feelings of disenfranchisement in previously safe seats. And I'd say, like, what we saw with Scotland definitely does kind of enhance that point. So even though it's not a proportional system in the general election in Scotland, obviously, we saw the rise of the SNP because it wasn't a wasted vote to vote for the Scottish National Party because of the changing politics as a result of devolution. So, yeah, we can vote for parties that represent our interests a lot more if the votes count more. Although, is that always a good thing? Because obviously it can lead to the rise of extremist parties and
Absolutely.
that sort of thing too. So, yeah. But yeah, thank you.
And
I think it's on
possibly
to you for the next one. Oh, sorry.
and possibly unstable coalitions as well, but we might come on to that later, so I'll leave that to one side for now. We've got an activity now called the Data Lab. You're going to analyse some data for me. And we've got a graph on the screen showing the votes won and the seats won, or the percentage of votes and percentage of seats won by the main parties. Don't worry about the 2 and the 3. I've just noticed it says Conservative 2, Labour 3. That was like a little footnote on my original data, which has bled through onto the graph. Don't worry about that. But can you tell me 2 ways, or you can go beyond this, but pick on 2 ways that this shows that the first past the post system led to a disproportionate result. Okay, you've got a little timer for this one as well. It's a lot more chilled music. What can you see? What are the main ones that jump out? It's nice to have some different tunes on this. I'll give you a little bit longer though, because people might be. I can't imagine some of you aren't feverishly typing, so it may well appear in a moment. We have got some reasonably clear ones there. So Fran has said that the Lib Dems receive very few seats in relation to their vote share, and that's very clear there, isn't it? They're getting 11.5% of the vote and less than 2% of the seats. Don said the Conservatives received many more seats than they did votes, which emphasises the winner's bonus. Really good, yeah, well done. And the Liberal Democrats received many more votes than seats. M&M Twins, 56.2 seats but 43.6% vote, shows that it's not proportional, as more seats than votes. And then Labour's was pretty close, wasn't it, really? Then the votes to seats was fairly proportional, but as was mentioned, the Conservatives got that winner's bonus there. They're sort of extra seats that come with winning. But it does mean they have a comfortable majority in the Commons, despite not getting a majority of the votes. There are other ones there as well. I mean, they're the sort of big ones, but you can also see the SNP, being, probably, even more overrepresented than the Conservatives. They get a bigger winner's bonus proportionally. Yeah, Rory's picked that up. Geographically concentrated support, absolutely. So because their support is geographically concentrated in a smaller number of seats, that leads to certainly the appearance of overrepresentation. And the Green Party and the Brexit Party have suffered a similar fate to the Liberal Democrats. It seems less because there are fewer seats and smaller percentages, but they too have been underrepresented. So Don's put the Lib Dem larger amount of votes compared to seats, highlights how they would benefit hugely in a proportional voting system because their votes are more widespread across the country and less concentrated. And it's worth pointing out the Liberal Democrats are very keen on changing to a proportional system, and you can see why when you look at data like this. So, I mean, I put a couple there. Liberal Democrats highly underrepresented, SNP are overrepresented, but absolutely Conservatives overrepresented and getting that winner's bonus. 2. Okay, well done. Some good answers
There's a
there.
nice stats to use in an essay as well as evidence to support the idea that first past the post can be unfair, and terms like Don was using talking about winner's bonus are really good to kind of get those knowledge marks in.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, pan back to Kira for the Eval-u-wheel.
Okay, yeah. So now we need to think a bit more about AO3, so evaluation, where effectively you look at kind of both sides of the argument and come over on an overall judgment. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a line of argument up, and the wheel will select one of these four. It's going to say depends on, assumptions, perspectives, or however. And we're going to continue that line of argument. So let's see what the line of argument is. Okay, so proportional representation allows for greater democracy and representation. So that is the clear line of argument. So let's see what we have to do with that when we're writing in our essay or for our paragraph. Because obviously we would have our evidence, we would analyse and explain that. But then the next part is the counter. So the thing that's popped up is however. So proportional representation allows for greater democracy and representation. However, how is it actually maybe not good for democracy, or how is it limited perhaps for democracy and representation? So we were quite positive about PR in the last activity, or the 2 activities ago. So what do we think now? Can we think of any counters to this idea that PR is actually better for democracy and representation? So maybe what are the setbacks?
Yeah. Any bad things about PR?
All PR is good PR? No. Boris Johnson's finding anyway. Let's find out. Like, is there anything to say that maybe it's not? It's less representative in some ways. I like to think about the role of the MP as well. So linking to democracy in this section. Don says, however, it increases the likelihood that extremist parties gaining representation, which could lead to anti-democratic parties becoming influential in decision-making. Perfect, right? And we can see that being a potential threat, where sometimes the big parties are good because they have to be catch-all rather than just about specific interests. So by having those minor parties gaining more voice, that could perhaps be maybe anti-democratic. So minority coalition results, it creates gridlocked parliaments and inefficient government. Perfect. Yeah. So how can a government represent the people and the needs, especially with events popping up and crises and things like that, if they're having to deal with arguments within a coalition because the parties are just too different in order to kind of reconcile differences? Really good point from Roy there.
And also just to make it more focused on the issue of democracy and representation, that point, you know, parties go to election on their manifestos and people vote for that or don't. And in the first past the post system, you know, you either get that manifesto or not. But if you end up with a coalition agreement between a few parties, well, nobody voted for that. You know, some people either did or didn't vote for the party's individual manifestos, but nobody voted for the coalition agreement. So you could say that that's less democratic.
Yeah, exactly, right. So coalitions, whilst it's good to have multiple voices represented, it can also have some setbacks because people can put kind of false promises in their manifestos that they know they don't intend to keep, but they know will get people to vote for them. So, I mean, maybe think 2010 with the Liberal Democrats, they made this real massive public pledge, signing this public pledge, and getting photos taken with them, saying we will absolutely, if we get into power, abolish tuition fees. Then they get into power in a coalition with the Conservative Party, and obviously there's negotiations.
And they vote to treble them.
yeah, exactly. They voted to treble them. So the Conservatives wanted to treble them in their manifesto. So you have two contradicting promises to the people. And effectively, it ends up being that Liberal Democrats have a free vote on it as a result, and or many of them voted to raise it. So check out who those people were. Luckily, I got my degree before that. Sorry, guys. I'm joking. Don also said, however, it generally revokes local representation due to the removal of the MP and constituency link. This can lead to constituents becoming apathetic and subsequently damaging participation levels.
Yeah, it's good.
Fantastic. Those are actually the exact two that I put down, right? So this idea then that first past the post is actually quite good, partly because it's obviously simple, but also because in terms of representation, you know who your MP is in Parliament, and it has that really strong link and that strong bond. So even if you didn't vote for your MP, they still have an obligation to represent you in Parliament. And also going off of that, it doesn't necessarily, according to the Burkean theory, it doesn't matter which way which political party, the MP is in, because they're going to use their expertise to represent you as best as possible. Not just the people who voted for them, but they have an obligation to all people in their constituency too. So it's not necessarily undemocratic in that sense, and it does provide a real clear representation, as well as the false electoral promises that can happen as a result of coalitions as well. So yeah, over to you, Duncan.
Okay, and it's sort of following on from that, really. We've had a lot on why we should change the voting system. So I feel, just to finish us off, really, we ought to think about arguments for keeping first past the post, and then we can, when we sort of sign off, we can think about our judgment, should we change it or not, although not for too long, because we are need to keep an eye on the time. But can you give me 3 arguments in favour of keeping first past the post? Okay. Okay, we got any arguments in favour of keeping first past the post? We've heard some criticisms of PR in the last section, so that may well link us to some. Don's put stability. Governments produced can be stronger and therefore allow for manifesto pledges to be delivered more easily. We've got that MP constituency link, which allows for greater local representation. It's tried and tested. It's simpler. We've got that from Fran and from the M&M twins. Everyone understands how it works. Usually produces one clear winner. Strong majority government with a mandate. Yeah, loads of good arguments there. So I came up with very similar ones to you. It's simple and quick. Voters understand it. It tends to have decisive results. It delivers majorities. And there's no clear demand to change it. You might debate, you might disagree with me about that, but there was the 2011 referendum, although admittedly that was just on AV, which was not in itself necessarily a more proportional system.
Yeah, it would have got the Lib Dems in power. That's probably all that it would have benefited.
But there hasn't been a great demand for another referendum, for example. So there you go. Those are some arguments on that. Just before we sign off, just point out that there are study notes on a lot of this stuff on the and much more on 222 website. If you've got a smartphone or whatever, you can scan that QR code. Like it was an NHS track and trace code, and you can get access to those resources. We also have revision guides and flashcards and all sorts that you can get there. Okay, thank you very much, guys. We'll go back to the green room and and sign off. So that was really interesting session. Some really good contributions from people in the chat window there. And of course, if you were writing an essay on this, you would need to make a judgment. You'd have that in your introduction. You'd follow it through. You'd consider those counter arguments, but you would need to back up that judgment. And And M&M Twins has asked the important question, do you know what the next revision session is on? So, yeah, we're going to be here every Monday. Next week, we're looking at Parliament. And then we will keep an eye on what comes up in the advance information that will be published next week. And that may well...
It's Monday.
Yeah, next Monday. So that may well steer us in terms of what we do for future ones, but it'll definitely be related to Parliament next Monday. Okay. And I think that's us, isn't it? So if you've enjoyed the session, please do click the thumbs up button, and that'll help other people find these videos. Also, if you subscribe to Tutor2U on YouTube, you'll be notified of future sessions. Okay, thanks guys, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Cool, thank you. Bye, guys.